A year had passed since Emily and I parted ways, and my life had veered in a completely unanticipated direction. I had relocated to a modest condo in the heart of the city, far removed from the house that once resonated with the echoes of our shared life. My days had taken on a steady rhythm, focused on work, reading, and the occasional social engagement. It was a simple, unadorned existence, but it offered the peace I had yearned for after the chaos of our breakup. Since the final court proceedings, Emily and I had adhered to an unspoken agreement of silence, neither of us attempting contact. The wounds from our separation were still too fresh, and I told myself that the distance was necessary. I doubted my ability to face her without unearthing the anger and pain that still lingered beneath the surface. One chilly November evening, as I prepared to settle in for a quiet night, an unexpected knock at my door broke the stillness. I wasn't anticipating anyone, so my curiosity was piqued. When I opened the door, I was stunned to see Emily standing there. She looked unsure, her stance tentative, with a mixture of determination and unease etched on her face. "James," she began softly, her voice trembling ever so slightly. "Emily, what are you doing here?" I asked, struggling to mask my surprise and confusion. "I know this is sudden," she said, wringing her hands nervously. "But I need to talk to you. It's important." A flood of questions overwhelmed me. Why was she here? Was she trying to dredge up the past, reopen old wounds? Or was this about something more serious? Against my better judgment, I stepped aside and gestured for her to come in. She entered cautiously, perching on the edge of my sofa with her back straight and her demeanor guarded. I sat across from her, maintaining a deliberate distance. Whatever she had come to say, I wasn't sure I was ready to hear it. "It's about my father," she finally said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Your father?" I repeated, frowning. "Richard." His name alone conjured a flurry of memories, most of them unpleasant. From the moment we'd met, Emily's father had made it clear he thought I wasn't good enough for his daughter. His constant meddling had sparked countless arguments between Emily and me, driving a wedge deeper into our marriage. "He's very ill," she continued, her eyes shimmering with unshed tears. "The doctors don't think he has much time left, and he's been asking to see you." "Me?" I asked, incredulous. "Why would he want to see me?" She hesitated, drawing a deep breath before answering. "He wants to apologize, James. He feels responsible for what happened between us." Her words hit me like a gut punch. Richard, the man who had gone out of his way to undermine me, now wanted to make amends. I didn't know how to process it. Part of me wanted to laugh at the absurdity, while another part bristled with unresolved anger. "I don't know, Emily," I said after a lengthy pause. "This is complicated." "I understand," she replied quickly, her voice laced with desperation. "But it would mean so much to him. And to me." I studied her face, searching for any trace of manipulation or hidden motives. All I found was sincerity and vulnerability. Despite everything that had transpired, a small part of me still cared for her. Seeing her in this state stirred something I couldn't quite suppress. After what felt like an eternity, I nodded slowly. "All right," I said. "I'll do it." 2 days later, I found myself standing outside Richard's hospital room, trying to steady my nerves for what was to come. My heart pounded in my chest as Emily stood beside me, her expression unreadable. She remained composed, her usual calm exterior revealing little of her inner turmoil. With a small, almost imperceptible nod from her, I reached for the door and pushed it open. Inside, Richard sat in a chair, looking frail and diminished. The man sitting before me was a shadow of the imposing figure I once remembered. His complexion was ashen, and his body appeared frail, far thinner than the image I had carried in my mind. Yet when his eyes met mine, a faint but sincere smile spread across his face. Despite the evident strain of staying alert, there was a flicker of emotion in his gaze that caught me off guard. "James," he rasped, his voice rough but steady, carrying a weight of sincerity that I hadn't anticipated. "Thank you for coming." I nodded silently, unsure of what to say. A complex web of emotions churned within me. For years, I had harbored anger toward this man, blaming him for many of the difficulties in my marriage. But now, seeing him so vulnerable, I felt the sharp edges of my resentment begin to soften. He wasn't here to argue or defend himself, He was seeking something unexpected, reconciliation. Drawing a shallow breath, he continued, his gaze unwavering. "I've had a lot of time to think about the past," he said. "And I see now how much damage I caused. I thought I was protecting Emily, but in truth, I only ended up hurting both of you." His admission struck a chord deep within me, sending an ache through my chest I hadn't expected. To hear Richard acknowledge the role he had played in the pain that had shaped so much of my life was both startling and strangely comforting. I felt a lump rise in my throat, and for a moment, I was unable to find my voice. Finally, I managed to reply, "I appreciate you saying that. But it wasn't just you. Emily and I made our own mistakes too." A faint, weary smile curved his lips, and his eyes softened as if a burden had been lifted. "Perhaps," he murmured. "But I hope you can find it in your heart to forgive an old man for his part in it." I swallowed hard, grappling with a mixture of emotions, relief, sympathy, and a surprising sense of release. "I forgive you," I said, my voice steady despite the storm brewing inside me. That conversation became a pivotal moment. After years of bitterness and estrangement, it created an opportunity for Emily and me to reconnect, not as a couple, but as two people bound by shared history and a mutual desire to support her father in his final days. We didn't revisit old conflicts or dwell on past mistakes. Instead, we focused on the present and how we could offer Richard the comfort and care he needed. In those weeks, we found a strange kind of peace, not by resolving everything but by simply choosing to let it go. Richard passed away a few weeks later. At his funeral, Emily and I stood side by side, no longer as adversaries burdened by a painful past, but as two people who had, in their own way, found a sense of healing. I stood beside her, not bound by love but by a quiet, mutual respect. In the days that followed, our conversations shifted away from what had gone wrong between us. Instead, we reflected on the memories we had shared, the lessons life had taught us, and the ways we had grown as individuals. We didn't rekindle our relationship. That chapter of our story was firmly closed. But for the first time in years, I could look at Emily without anger or bitterness. What remained was a sense of calm, an acknowledgement of the good times we had experienced and the strength we had gained through the challenges we faced. Months later, an unexpected letter arrived in the mail. It was from Richard's lawyer, informing me that he had left me a modest inheritance. Along with the money, there was a handwritten note. "James, thank you for forgiving me. Use this to start something new. You deserve it. Richard." As I read his words, I felt a wave of closure I hadn't realized I was still seeking. His message was brief but deeply meaningful, a final gesture of kindness and redemption. I thought back to the night Emily had appeared at my door, a moment that had felt so uncertain at the time. I never could have imagined it would lead here, not to a rekindled romance, but to something equally profound, healing and understanding. Life has a way of unfolding in the most unexpected ways. Through this journey, I've learned that forgiveness is one of the greatest gifts we can give, not only to others but also to ourselves.